So what I want to have a look at here is how to make it easier to manage multiple tenants using PowerShell and the Microsoft Graph. Now, what we're going to do is we are firstly going to log into two tenants just to show you that this is how it works with normal tenants. So we're going to go to portal.office.com. On the first tenant here, you'll see that this is a normal tenant. There is no MFA for this login. This is an admin user in this case, so we'll get access to the tenant. All right, so this will be the first tenant that we'll use for our demonstration purposes. Nothing unusual about it, standard tenant. So we would need to, again, work with that tenant. Now the other tenant that we'll work with, another one here, will open up in an alternate browser. So what we'll do is we will log into that basically in our Edge. So this will be the other tenant that we will work with. Right, now you'll see in this case, this is one that has been configured for MFA. So I'll need to complete the MFA process to allow this. All right, so we just need to approve that, and then we can log in. So now these will be the two tenants that we work with. Now, what we will do here is we'll use some of the tools that I have basically made available to people for free. So again, we will find that if we go into my GitHub repository. So the way to do that is, let's go into a normal browser session and go into GitHub. So you'll find my GitHub repository out there basically at github.com/director CIA. All right, so if we go in there and we make this /director CIA, and the repository that we want to go into is Office 365. So we go into Office 365. First file that we want to download here is going to be this one here called graph add .exe. So what this is going to do is it's going to basically go in and add an Azure AD application into our environment so that we can use that to work with the Microsoft Graph. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to keep that. All right, so let's go in here and select to keep that file. All right, and hopefully when that downloads in a second or two, we'll move that into a separate directory there. All right, so let's go and have a look and see where that is. So let's basically move it out of there and let's put it into a nice clean test directory that we have. All right, so we'll paste it in there. So the first step in the process is going to be to download and now run the graph AD app-add.exe. So if we just double click on that and run that, you'll see that it will maybe give you that warning. So what we can do is override that. Okay, that's the protection that we have on the PC. And you'll see that what it is running now is effectively a PowerShell script. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give this a name. All right, so I'm going to call this, for example, this is going to be the name of my Azure AD application. And now it's going to ask me for the tenant login. So what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to need to cycle through all my tenants, right? So the first thing I'll do is I'll give the login details for the first tenant. You'll see that I'll be prompted to log in to that. All right, so what I'm going to do is this process is going to basically go in and create an Azure AD application of the name that I've selected. All right, so it's now created that. Okay, now what I need to do here is there are a number of configuration variables that I need to save, and there are 4 of them. Now I've copied those variables into the clipboard, so all you have to do is go Control V and Control V and Control V and Control V again. Now it's done that, and then what it does in the background here, if we have a look in here, it will write those details into basically encrypted XML files, which we'll take a look at in more detail. So let's go off and do our second tenant. So put the details in for that again and log into that as normal, and we'll have to put in again our password and approve the authenticator request. So let's approve that, do a multifunction factor login. We'll go in and create a app of the same name in this different tenant. So again, just Control V, Control V, Control V, Control V again. And now it has finished that completely. So I can now hit enter to finish that process, and it is now added that Azure AD app. Now, what has this actually done? Well, what it's done is if we go into the tenants that we've just nominated there, and we go into the Azure side of that, so again, portal.azure.com, and we go in and have a look at the Azure Active Directory. So let's go in here and have a look at Azure Active Directory. Now we want to go down to app registrations, right? So on the left-hand side there, select app registrations. When you do, you will see that there is an Azure AD app here with the details that we just selected. So in this case, CIOps-demo. Make sure that you're in the all applications area here so you can see that. Now if we select this Azure AD app, you'll see that I have things like a client ID, a directory ID, and object ID. Now these are some of the variables that are saved in those XML files. And what I need to have a look at is if I go into the API permissions here, you'll see that this has no permissions at the moment. So what we've got is we've got effectively a user, an Azure AD application inside our tenant with no permissions to perform any task yet. Now what we're going to do in the next step is basically go in here, we would add a permission, we would go to the Microsoft Graph, select application permission, and what we would do in here is we are going to add, for example, the permission to read all the reports for this tenant. Now we can go in and do this manually. I could tick this and then I could consent to it, and then that job is done. But what we're going to do is we're going to do that in an automated way, again, using PowerShell. So to do that, what I'll need to do again is I'll need to pop out to back out to the GitHub. All right, so we need to go back to here, and now we'll be looking for an option here called Graph AD app-per-add.exe. Now what this is going to do is this is going to basically go in, and this will add permissions to allow us to work, in this case, with OneDrive for Business. So what that's going to allow us to do is to give us the permissions in the Microsoft Graph to allow us to go in and run some reports and get some details in that. Now, we've added the application that will allow us to go in there and do that, and now we have to give that application the appropriate permissions to do that. So let's go in and, again, take that file and let's go in and put that into our test area. All right, so we've downloaded that file again here. Now, if we take a moment here and just look at these configuration files, you'll see that for each domain there are 4 configuration files, 4 XML files, and these contain the app ID, the app secret for the Azure application, the object ID, and the tenant ID. So if we go in here and look at the app secret, if you have a look at this closely, let's go in and open this in Notepad, for example, you'll see that the actual app password is stored in here. So this is what we copy and pasted in, but you'll notice that it basically has encrypted that into something that is not stored in plain text on the disk. Now, the way encryption works in this case with the XML files is that the files are locked basically to this PC and to this user. So we can't just take those files, copy them to another machine, and then use them to access the Azure AD app. The only way we can do that is on this machine with this user actually logged in. So we're pretty comfortable that these are secure. Now, what we want to do is add those permissions, as I mentioned. So we're going to add those read reports permissions. So the way we do is run that, again, application we just downloaded. We'll run it anyway. Maximize this, and you'll see that what it will now do is it will now go in and say, well, we need to log into those tenants again. So what I'm going to do is log into that tenant. Now it's picked up the details of the tenants to actually go and set the permissions on based on those XML configuration files. So these, again, have come from that initial process of adding that Azure AD application to our environment. So it's going to go through and read those and then add that permission to that Azure AD app in that tenant, which it's doing now. And then once it's finished that, it will repeat that process for our other tenant. That will take a moment or two to complete. Now, when we do run that, we will have to consent to the permissions, which that means that we have to approve those permissions, and we're typically going to have to do that in a browser. Unfortunately, we can't do that programmatically. Now, we could open the default browser, but because we already have both of those tenants already open, we're going to select no there. And then what it does, it has copied the process. We'll copy it to the clipboard. So we're working with this domain. So let's go out. We know that one is actually over here in Edge in private. So let's go in and paste that consent URL. So we could open that in the browser and log in again, but we've already got the tenants open. We will consent to those permissions. You'll notice that that is the name of the app that we basically have set, and we are giving that app these permissions. In this case, the OneDrive reporting will only need to read the usage reports. We need to sign in, obviously, as that user profile and read their profile. So we're happy with that. Let's go accept. So that has now given that Azure AD app the appropriate permissions. Let's go back to our program and say yes, that we have completed that for that domain. And now we are taken into the next domain. So this process is going to, again, loop through all the domains that we have selected here, and we are going to add those permissions, all right? And then we are going to ask for consent. Now, consent, unfortunately, like I said, has to be done in the browser. So I'm not going to open the default browser as before. You'll see that we've already opened that tenant back over here in this other browser. So let's paste that consent URL in there. Remember, that was copied to the clipboard as part of this process. Again, same permissions there because we want to do the same thing. So let's go in and accept that. That process is now complete. So we go back here and we say that yes, it has been completed. And because there are no more domains that have configuration files, that process is now completed, and we can hit enter to enter it. Now, if we go in and have a look once again here, so let's just refresh this. So let's go back here and then go back to our app registrations. You'll see here is the app that we put in that we showed you initially, right? CIOps-demo. We now go into the API permissions. You'll see that this reports.read.all has been added. So this was added by that process, and you'll see that the consent was also granted, which we went through on the website. So now we're pretty good to go. We can go in and start actually running some reports. Now, when we do that, because we have the Azure AD app already in our tenant, plus we also have given it permissions, and we have all the configuration files to access that, we won't need to perform any further logins. So let us pop back to GitHub again. All right, so I'll close that. And in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to download the one that we want here is going to be the Graph OneDrive for Business-get exe. So let's download that. All right, and go through the same process of keeping that file. And keep that anyway. And then once we've got that, we'll move that into that same folder. Now this file, like I said, will go and give you reports on OneDrive for Business across multiple tenants, but it will also need the configuration files to actually go and execute. So what we'll need to do is we'll need to put those in that same directory. All right, so let's put that file in there. So what we've got here is we went in and we created an app, an Azure AD app for every tenant that we selected. We then went and set the permissions for that app to allow us to do what we want. In this case, do some OneDrive for Business reporting. And now we are going to basically run that reporting process. So let me double click on that. And again, we need to go in here and say run anyway. And off it will launch, and there it is completed. Now, the important thing here to note is that I wasn't prompted for a login once. Now, that is because we have the Azure AD app in each tenant. We also have all the configuration login details held in those encrypted XML files that are also in that directory. So again, we won't be prompted for any login details. We don't need that. you'll see in this case, in this example, it goes to the first domain, it looks at all the users, and then will summarize their details for OneDrive for Business. So that's the summary for the first domain. Now it goes into the second domain, and there's a summary for the second domain, and you'll see it then gives us a total summary of the two. So in this case, 2 domains, 27 users, and the stats there. So you'll see in the second domain we've got 20 users, and back in the first domain we've got 7. All right, so then that indicates that process is now complete. All right, so what we've done now is once we have set up that Azure AD app and we have set the appropriate permissions, I don't have to go back in and do that again. I can just again run this file. Okay, so this will take advantage of those existing configuration files, the existing Azure AD app, the existing permissions that have been applied to that Azure AD app and each tenant, and then give us a report. So again, this makes it nice and easy to go out and manage our environment. And the important thing here is I can start using the graph to make calls for additional information. I can also use the graph to make changes in settings. So not only can I pull OneDrive for Business information, I can now start crafting program scripts and automation processes that take advantage of those Azure AD apps inside that environment, and they can get that information. Again, they won't need that login because all of those details are basically there. Now, if you do want to remove all that, so you don't want to have those Azure AD apps in there anymore, again, there is a program that I can provide you that will do that. So you go ahead and go back to GitHub. What you're looking for is graph-ad app-del.exe. Right, so again, let's download that, put that in that same directory. So what the delete program here is going to do is it's going to, again, take those configuration files, look inside of them, and basically then go through and remove the Azure AD application from all those locations for you. All right, so let's again get rid of that and put it into the test location. Okay, so put it in there, and once again, when we're ready and we're finished with the AD app inside all our environments, what I'm going to do is run this. Okay, and I need to go in and run that anyway. So now, because we are removing something from our environment, we'll need to again log into each of those tenants. So let's go in and log in again. And remember that the reason that we need to log in this case is because we are actually removing something out of the tenant. So let's go in and log into each tenant. And then once we've logged in successfully, what you'll see is that application is now removed. And not only is the application removed, all the configuration files will also be removed as well, all right, leaving no trace. So let's go into our second domain here. All right, so let's go into the second domain. And let's put in the password. Okay, put in the password as before. All right. Okay, and the process is finished. You'll notice that the process is it will remove that Azure AD application as well as any of the configuration files, so they will be gone as well. If you look at back in our directory, we see the exes and also the log files, right? So if we want to, for example, see what this deletion process does, just click on the text log file there, and you will see that process and all the details in there. So that makes it nice and easy. So in summary, what I did was, if you go to my GitHub repository, look in the Office 365 location, you will find a file called graph-ad app-add.exe. You run that, and that allows you to put an Azure AD application in all the tenants you nominate. Once you have done that, you can basically then go in and download and run graph-ad app permissions-add. Now this exe file here will add permissions to the Microsoft Graph to that Azure AD application to allow it to use the Microsoft Graph to read the reports, and we can use that then to, for example, report on OneDrive for Business. And once those two things have been done, you again don't have to go back and rerun them. You only need to do those once. And then as an example, you would download from the same GitHub repository graph-odfb.get.exe, and that will give you that OneDrive for Business report. Okay, and it will read any configuration files that are in there and then give you that report which I showed you. And if you do want to go in after that, you can run the delete program from that same location to get rid of all those applications in your Azure AD and also any of the local files as well. So if we go in here and refresh this and go back to our app registrations, all right, you'll see that that Azure AD app we added earlier is now being removed. So there's no worries about that being left behind and security concerns. So you can delete it out of there programmatically as well. So again, take advantage of that. Remember that all those files and many more you will find in my GitHub repository. You will find those again at github.com/directorcia. Have a look in the Office 365 repo, and those files generally are exes and they start with graph. So hopefully that's given you an insight into how it is possible to manage multiple tenants using the Microsoft Graph, which can, as shown, alleviate the need to log into every tenant every time to get the information that you need. Thank you very much for watching the video.